Robbie Lawler was out of control.
This is Double Cross, the murder of Robbie Lawler.
It was going to be an all-out war with him in the middle of it.
A Crime World special investigation podcast based on my new book, Web of Betrayal, wherever you get your podcasts.
So the search operation to try and find information about the disappearance of Jojo Dollard ended, I suppose, in disappointment for the family this week. However, the guards have also suggested at least that it has had some value and that they hope there are some leads come out of it. What do we know about the search at this point?
So they announced this week that the search had been wound down, that basically they had finished everything they needed to do on that particular site. And it seems that they didn't find anything. They obviously didn't find Jojo, and they didn't find anything of evidential value because obviously there was talk about certain items that was with Jojo that night, like her Sanyo cassette tape and stuff like that. So we're assuming from that they didn't find anything like that. But they did say, well, sources are saying that there was promising leads from it. But there's still a lot of work to do in the case, basically.
So if we go back to the Jojo Dollard case, it was one of, I suppose, those infamous disappearances that all occurred in the general area of Kildare and Wicklow. Tell us about when she was last seen and what we know about her final movements.
So Jojo was up in Dublin for the day, and she was due to start a job in her native Kilkenny the following day. And I think she had told her sister, Kathleen Bergen, that she would meet her the following day if she didn't if she wasn't due to start the job. So this was obviously 1995, so there wasn't mobile phones or anything then. So she was up in Dublin for the day, and she was basically on her way home. She was in Brussel's bar, which we all know is just off the Grafton Street, meeting friends, and she'd missed her last bus home to Callan and Kilkenny. So she got a bus to Naas, and then she hitchhiked a couple of lifts. One lift brought her to further on into Kildare, and then another lift brought her to Moon. So at this point then, I think it was around midnight in November, and she called her friend Mary Cullinan, and her friend Mary was, speaking to her, and she was basically saying she didn't know how she was going to get home. And then she said, hang on a second, Mary, dropped the phone. Mary, there's obviously a car pulled up, and then she came back and she told Mary, have a lift, and that's the last she's ever been heard of.
So at that's all those years ago.
Yeah.
And at this 29 years ago, effectively. And at that point, she disappears, and there is no real further evidence of what happened to her.
No.
We never find a body. There's never any further confirmed sightings.
No.
It becomes one of those cases that is included in, I suppose, the Vanishing Triangle is what it was called.
Yes.
And that Vanishing Triangle became the focus of a major garda operation as they, I suppose they looked back on it and tried to see if there was similarity in a number of cases. Yeah,
so it was a big part of Operation Trace, and I suppose it was Jojo's case, given the manner in which she disappeared, which is, I suppose, something you'd see in a movie, that she was hitchhiking home alone late at night, a young girl, and she hasn't been seen since. And then obviously all these theories around a possible serial killer Larry Murphy all sprung up. Obviously, her case in particular, Annie McCarrick, who disappeared a couple of years earlier, and then Deirdre Jacob, who disappeared in 1998. Those ones in particular, they were among a number of women, but there are known suspects in the other cases, but those three in particular were linked to Larry Murphy. So I know there was a feeling among people, the family, well, I know there's a feeling that might have kind of taken things away, the Larry Murphy theory, but Mary Phelan, Jojo's sister, who has since passed away, she had been campaigning tirelessly, as has her sister Kathleen Bergen since, on behalf of missing people, and they were of the opinion that there was a suspect closer to, in that area, and that they hired a private detective. And actually it came out during the latest investigation that the suspect that had a mark on his face, and this was noticed by a private detective hired by the family just in the weeks after Jojo's disappearance, and that they'd been campaigning for lands to be searched, and those lands are the lands that were searched in recent weeks. But I suppose that could only have been done with more resources, which comes with a murder investigation. And, the case was just a missing persons case at this point. This was years ago. So now in 2020, since then, it's been a murder investigation.
So obviously the Larry Murphy connection, and the reason that Larry Murphy was at least being mentioned in connection with this case was because he had committed a very, very horrendous, serious crime involving the rape and attempted murder of a woman who was effectively just abducted off the street. And at least the guards looked into Jojo Dollard because something of the similarities, and Larry Murphy at least had been known to be in the area. But we do know, and obviously when this recent arrest occurred, we get a lot of calls about Larry Murphy, but we do know for a fact that Larry Murphy is not somebody that they've looked at. However, a man has been arrested, and you're talking about a huge passage of time. What do we know about that man without getting into too much details? Obviously, he was held for a period of time and released.
Yeah, so this man has been part of the, not necessarily a suspect, but he's been a person of, I wouldn't say even a person of interest, but he's been involved in the investigation from the start because he actually came forward to Gardaí himself in the weeks following Jojo's disappearance and said, he said that he had been in contact with her before she disappeared. And obviously they spoke to him, but it was a missing persons investigation at the time. So he was a witness in the case essentially. And then a couple of years later, in 1998, the Operation Trace, which was tasked specifically with looking at certain missing women cases. Alan Bailey was one of the leads detectives in that. They spoke to him, and we spoke to Alan Bailey in recent weeks where he told us about his interaction with this person and said, that he was a person of interest to them, but obviously they couldn't directly put questions. He wasn't under arrest. It was a missing person investigation at the time. He came across as a genuine family man. And he did say, that he had come forward and that he basically had said he had had contact with Jojo, but he didn't have any, he didn't seem like he would have any other reason to come forward. He wasn't, he was putting himself in it, and why would he do that essentially? Yeah,
so obviously the passage of time, 29 years passed, there's never been an arrest. However, the case was upgraded to murder at some point. Was it last year?
The case was upgraded to murder in 2020.
Yeah.
And obviously that gives you more resources in terms of Gardaí, and you have the powers then to go and arrest people on suspicion of murder and to put certain things to them. So, I don't know if back then they would have been able to arrest somebody. You can't arrest somebody on suspicion of murder if it's just a missing person case, obviously. So it has helped them. And since 2020, there's been 800 different things that have emerged from this investigation.
What they say is these are lines of inquiry, but these can be very minor or major things. They can be somebody may have contacted them in over the years and said, I saw a woman. I think I saw a woman that night, and they might then, the guards might go look into it, see if there was other people around. They may be then able to rule that out and say, no, that was, Miss X or whatever.
Yeah.
So those lines of inquiry, they can be 800. It doesn't mean
recommendations, sorry, is book Gardaí. So there was 800 recommendations taken by the investigations team. But as you said, that can be various different things. And it can be, we had a story a couple of years ago in the wake of the murder investigation being officially upgraded, where we went down, Patrick O'Connell went down to Moon where Jojo was last seen and spoke to a shopkeeper, a local businesswoman, and she said a man had come up around that time and said that he was about to make a report to Gardaí that he had seen on the night Jojo disappeared a woman naked running down the street screaming, and for some reason that he'd made it at the time and the guards hadn't officially logged it. And then I think since then they have taken his statement, but so there's been various different things, and we don't know if that had actual relevance to the Jojo case, but it's a strange coincidence. So all of these things, there are people coming forward, and some of them may be ruled in, some of them may be ruled out, but of course they're very important because
because what they'll do is they go back over each of the statements, so there'll be a file. I presume not much, there may be stuff digitally at this stage, but they'll go back and look at each of the statements, which will be about people's movements, see if they can match up, see if there's inconsistencies in any of them. If there are inconsistencies, they then go and look to see if they can be explained or not, as the case may be.
Yeah.
But there's still the obvious issue and an issue for the family is that there's her remains have never been found, obviously.
No, they haven't. And I suppose this is very disappointing for them because they have been campaigning for so long. They've been so public and it's so difficult for them. You know, we've all probably at one point spoken to Kathleen Bergen. She's a really lovely woman. She's Jojo's eldest sister and she is the woman who reported her missing because Jojo had been due to meet her the next day, but she was also due to start a job. And I think she made that report on a Friday. I believe Jojo went missing on a Thursday and it wasn't actually opened by Gardaí until Monday. So it's just being an awful time for them. Her other sister, Mary Phelan, was really involved in highlighting missing person cases as a whole, and she passed away a few years ago. And there's actually reports have said that there was a photo frame of Jojo beside her bed when she passed away. So it's been such an impact on them, and they have put out statements in recent weeks. Kathleen hasn't spoken directly to any media, but you can just imagine the toll it's taken. They've had to make themselves involved in the public in such a nobody would want that, No. So,
and have they reacted to the end of the search this week yet?
I think there's been a post up on social media where they have basically said that they haven't given up hope and that they're praying that one day they will get resolution to it. But I suppose even though there may have been some around the case have suggested dissatisfaction with the fact that the Gardaí didn't search lands back then, that at least this has been happened now. And we've seen this in recent years with searches in relation to other missing person cases too. And I suppose it does move the case forward because it puts it back in the public light and there could be people that come forward. This has been the case to unlocking other missing person mysteries where and people with guilty consciences have come forward. So you just never know. So you have to keep putting it out there.
Yeah, and I think a couple of the reports have suggested that there have been people come forward and give bits of information.
Yeah.
Obviously, the man arrested has been released without charge.
Yeah.
There's no, the guards are not. We don't know what he said or whatever, but they certainly didn't charge him with any offence.
No.
So, I mean, it comes as well in the week that I suppose that missing people again were in the headlines because of, every year there's a sort of a day where the guards and other parts of the state, I suppose, bring people together and try and put the issue of missing people in the public eye again.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And you hear so many different stories. These cases, Jojo and the others that I mentioned, like Deirdre Jacob and Annie McCarrick, have really struck a chord with the public because, of the nature of their disappearances. They were all assumed to be violent. They were young women in the prime of their lives. But there's so many other cases, hundreds of people go missing every year in Ireland. We heard stories about, people that have been missing for over 40 years this week. And then, of course, there's Trevor Deely, the young Dublin man. It's actually his anniversary on Sunday. I believe he went missing on December 8th. In the early 2000s. So he's, and that's been an awful toll on his family too. So it really does bring it back. I suppose coming into Christmas as well, you think of the plight that the families are all going through as well. So it's, so this is one of the most high profile, but you do forget how many there are out there and how many families are just looking for answers.
Yeah. And of course, exactly. And for those families, the lack of even the fact that they don't know, it adds an extra burden as well as, the presumed, certainly in Jojo's case, the presumed murderer that they have to deal with as well. Yeah,
of course. But it's definitely, I suppose, a step in the right direction in the sense that this was, according to sources that spoke to the Sunday World, an unprecedented search. We had pictures in the Sunday World there a couple of weeks ago about the scale of it. They were like 5 foot wide, 6 foot deep trenches that they had dug up. And there were, when the Sunday World went to the site, there were witnesses there who were kind of just observing what was going on. And sources had said that these, people they didn't see anything directly on the night, but they had seen comings and goings linked to that site in the weeks after Jojo's disappearance. So that in itself is a big development. And while it doesn't look like anything of evidential value was found, it still, does, I guess, strengthen the Gardaíes, hopefully strengthen their case in the sense that, you know, they're ruling things are in or out.
Yeah, and hopefully it does spark maybe some memory or something that somebody has forgotten or didn't feel comfortable saying at the time.
Exactly, yeah.
So no doubt we'll come back to it, and we wish Jojo's family well, of course.
Of course,
It's
yeah.
a difficult time.
Yeah.
So thanks, Eimear.
Thanks, Niall.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.